All right, welcome everyone, and to another edition of Mai Unguwa. And today we have a truly special guest, my friend and brother. We go way back, uh, way back almost a decade now. I think since more than a decade. 2000. That was in South Africa in 2011, thereabout. All right, anyway, so introduce yourself to us. Let's get started from there.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Olusola Ogunnubi. I'm called Shola now. It's great to be here. Really, I followed your compilation for your ideas and the presentations with the different invitations of quite a while, and I found them quite creative and fascinating. And it's been a pleasure for me to be part of it. Finally. So by way of introduction, of course, my name is Olusola Ogunnubi, political science, international relations scholar. I basically work in the field of soft power and African international relations broadly. And I've also transitioned into some research around border diplomacy, resource governance, and the likes. What else? I have a PhD in political science, 2024, University of KwaZulu-Natal. I've done some postdocs here and there, done some affiliation visits, research fellow here and there, University of the Free State, Carleton University, which I'm also affiliated with right now. Currently, I've transitioned from South Africa, where I started off my career. I also went to University of Ibadan, just for the record. Finished best student in my class.
Oh, nice.
It's a huge company to be with them. I always like to keep track of senior colleagues who finished best students at UI Political Science Department, and it's a huge privileged company to be in. What else? I'm excited to be in Canada. I'm transitioning to the Canadian academic space. I teach at Brandon University, Canada, in Manitoba. Yeah, that's about it. I'm happy to be here and to discuss and talk freely about politics, international relations, and whatever you have me answer.
Thank you so much, Shola. So you started from Nigeria, South Africa, Canada. In a way, our trajectory is kind of alike in that sense. Let me go back to South Africa a little bit, because that was where we first met at the Department of Political Science with other colleagues from Nigeria, South Africa, Zambia, and so many other parts of Africa, under the supervision of Professor Ufo Okeke-Uzodike. Yeah. When I look back at my career, I would say for me that was where it started, right? Having that kind of a setting and that kind of a mentor, right, at that time of my life was really, really significant. And I don't know whether you could speak to that. What was happening at that time in 2011? I don't know when you left South Africa. I left in 2012. But for the 2 years that I was, at that department, it changed everything for me. It was actually where I, wrote my first article that really inspired me to keep going. It was where I met you. I saw, how you took your work seriously. Your mentorship also, in a way, we're going to come to that, actually started from there as well. And I want to ask you a little bit on. So what was happening around that time for you in South Africa? And if you could speak a little bit about that experience.
Okay. Yeah, it's I made a post, coincidentally, I made a post on my Facebook recently. It wasn't about Young Scholar, it was just a random post about how we needed to appreciate a lot more what South Africa had done for a lot of Black scholars or African scholars that we know today, at least for my field, and definitely for other fields that I know of in sciences. And that's because, and I use that to make an argument that we should actually accept the fact that South Africa has paid more than enough price, or, because we always make the case that South Africa hasn't done well to appreciate what Africans did in support of the fight against apartheid. But if you look at what South Africa was able to do through its higher education throughout this period, particularly in the early 2004 up until recently, a huge number of us have benefited from that environment, and that's from the mentorship, from the organized higher education system that we found ourselves in, and from there we have created. We have not just become African scholars, we become global scholars, and the evidence are there everywhere. And you become a global scholar when you can easily transition. My argument, when you can easily transition out of Africa and ease into another system without any discrimination or prejudice against your training. And that's and we see a lot of shiniest example would be of course one of our friends, Daniel Agbo, who was also our colleagues. Sometimes I feel like I've not done enough. We all trained, we all ate from the same system, and he's in Harvard or he's in Oxford, and I was like, okay, at the minimum, we should be in like Boston or something, because we all trained from the same system. We all ate, the same intellectual food, and I'm just excited for all of the progress that we've seen. So, coming back to what you mentioned about the kind of people we met on ground, from Professor Uzodike to even our senior peers like Dr. Ayo, Sakemi, and I might not remember the names now, but
Hakeem was there as well.
yeah, in fact, interestingly, and that's for me, I don't have any shame in learning, and that's one thing about me. If you need information, you go out and find it, and you humble yourself to do that. The first I learned how to write a paper. I always say this, and I don't know if it's relevant, but the first I learned how to write academic papers from asking questions from Hakeem, because Hakeem sat right beside me in the PhD student room, and I always see gallery proof of submission. They're like, what's happening? What's happening? Is this another thesis? And at that time, I didn't know anything about academic writing for publications. We're all just doing the thesis, and that was it. But I'll see Hakeem publish one, publish two, publish three, and I'm asking questions. What's happening? How does it happen? How do you submit a paper? How do you go online? How do you research? And I learned much of that from the outset from Professor Hakeem today, and I'm grateful for that. And I think from that fact, a lot of who I am today is a function of the kind of training we had, both not only from peers, but also not only from the staff and professors, but also from our peers, and including yourself, in fact. And I remember vividly all the interactions and the debates and the conversations we've had, both in the university and off university, in football pitches, and it's been enormously transformative for me and a lot of my colleagues, and we can see proof of that from where most people are today. Those who have, we have even in those who have moved back to Nigeria have become heads of departments or deans of faculties and the likes. And it's just amazing to see how much came out of that small academic space in Pietermaritzburg, Durban, and the like. So it's we can't really tell the full story without giving credence to the School of Social Sciences, including Nancy, Perdita Peters. One should also acknowledge their role in helping us administratively.
Yeah.
What's this guy's name? I'm trying to remember again. There's another young dude that I don't recall immediately.
Right.
Vincent. It won't be good if I don't recall his name. Vincent. Yeah. Yes, it's been that. I'll leave it at that. But it's a way to appreciate what South Africa has done. Many of us studied tuition free. I got into South Africa with $600 in my pocket, I needed to pay for my rent for the whole year. I needed to pay, get a few things for myself, pay my initial deposit for accommodation. And how I survived that, I don't know, was just basically on the basis of how much Professor Okeke-Uzodike helped us
Yeah.
to settle into the system and also to mentor us into who we are today.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for mentioning those names and especially the last one there, Professor Ufo. He was my supervisor. Inspired me to write. Hakeem also played a huge part. Like at that time, also I would see Hakeem working on, terrorism, working on
Yeah, yeah, Boko
political,
Haram.
Boko Haram, exactly. And in a way, my interest in Boko Haram, started from there. And yes, we started writing, and Akim was some sort of a mentor to me, while Ufo was my supervisor, and then the discussions we would have. So you mentioned South Africa as that place for us, right? Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, it played a huge part, not just us, so many other people in different fields, not political science, medicine, engineering, agriculture. We met our colleagues, from other schools as well. Some might say that Nigeria did the same thing to other, whether Africans and nationals of other countries in the 60s, also in the 70s. You mentioned the University of Ibadan. Ile-Ife was another. ABU Zaria. What would you say went wrong, with the universities in Nigeria that we can't speak of them as we used to in the past?
It's something I've thought about for quite a while. I think it might be different case for different departments, and I'm not sure if I should speak, but of course, it all boils down to the underfunding of the university system in Nigeria. But more importantly, I see a trend within the academic settings in Nigeria where most of the reputable scholars prefer to go into consulting because that's where their scholarship is hugely monetized. And so you don't often see, maybe once or twice, once in a while, they would do a book like Fosa Osage and the likes. They would do a book or a paper, Asan, Saliu, and quite a number of them that are very popular at least for international relations and political science in Nigeria. I think that what has happened is that there's a lot of need for consultancy work that academic are filling up that spaces because there's an immediate compensation for their work. And so instead of you going to write a book, a paper that nobody ends up, you only do the bare minimum that you need for your promotion and to the next level. And once you do that, you are more focused into consulting for the military, consulting for NGOs, consulting for the legislature, consulting for all kinds of stakeholders, and even being a ghostwriter for
Yeah.
different politicians. That there's huge money in that sense. So if you compare that to what South Africa has been able to do in how there's a system that compensates, I won't say compensate, incentivizes for research done, whether through research grants or through subsidies for research publication in DOHET accredited publications. And that arrangement has helped South Africa to be more visible on the global academic space with their publications. So I think while we have grown so much in the quality of our teaching, we have regressed in the quality of our research. And that's, for me, I link it to the need for the fact that salaries are not enough and professors need to make up that shortfall from elsewhere. And if you have to publish a work that doesn't get compensated for, you even have to look for money sometimes to pay for subscription fee or what's it called, publication fee, page fees, then it takes away from your already meager resources. And so for me, I think the culprit I want to trace this to is the lack of, financialization or the lack of financial support for publications, which a lot of academics that I speak to, colleagues that I speak to from Africa, from Nigeria, complain about how their work is not fully compensated for, whether through research grants or even through um, through research subsidies. The least they would get is from something from outside to attend a conference, and maybe from TED Fund. And I think that we need to rework that arrangement in ways that help to compensate or incentivize for research done. And so you find a lot of more research we see from Africa being low quality or just being the barest minimum. And even though they are publishable, they are not in conversation with mainstream scholarship, and as a result, not citable because of that lack of conversation with mainstream scholarship. That's
Yeah.
my general take, and that's how I would compare South Africa. If you, in all honesty, I still think that Nigeria is way ahead, especially in the humanities and social sciences, when it comes to the teaching component of their programs. But in comparison to South Africa, but lacking heavily when it comes to research. And the reason for that is because of the fact that they can do more research and write more for non-academic purposes, and get more benefit from that. And I've done some similar work even in Nigeria, where I've been invited to contribute to some book projects, whether by NIA or something, or some government institutions, a national legislature or something, that they pay for. They pay you to write a chapter, which is quite odd, but those are the kind of research that you see most of our colleagues from Nigeria and elsewhere doing, because you have an immediate reward, 200,000 naira, 300,000 naira for a chapter. You do that, you write it, you submit it. The chapter is not online, it's not visible. I did one recently for National Arts Theatre or something, that was paid for a little bit token. So you find this kind of research that is being done by African or Nigerian scholars, and that's my general assessment. I might be wrong, but that's how I see things in terms of what has happened.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. And I was also listening to, I think it was Bishop Kuka on Arise TV recently,
Yeah.
who was speaking about another different issue entirely with the Nigerian universities. And I think here he was focusing, I guess, given his own background in ethno-religious studies and conflict, he was focusing on nepotism, right? That a lot of these universities are homogenizing in terms of filling up certain positions with certain groups of people, whether in terms of ethnicity or religion, and that in itself is also a big problem. I think he mentioned a few universities. ABU is one, and a few others in southern Nigeria. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I agree with him, but we have to also put that in context. But for me, I think it's less evident in the southern parts, more broadly in Nigeria, than it is in the northern parts. I've had Igbo lecturers, even though I studied in southwestern part of Nigeria. So I think it's less evident in the southern part, southwest, southeast,
Okay.
than it is in the north. So we should put that in context. It's not like it's a general atmosphere of nepotism, and I wouldn't agree totally, but I'll just put the caveat that it's less obvious in the south than it is, because I've had all kinds of lecturers back. I've had lecturers even when I was at UI. I had all varieties of lecturers teach me from all parts of the world, all parts of Nigeria,
Yeah.
at least reasonably. So it's I wouldn't put it at a general landscape of nepotism in Nigeria's academic space.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the general comment I'll have in
All right.
that direction.
Okay, but there is still
Oh,
hope, right?
you have a different opinion.
No, no,
I know you
not
studied in the north.
not that I have a different opinion. I think from my conversation with people, and I don't know much about Southern Nigerian university situation there or setting,
Yeah.
but clearly in ABU the sentiment is that since KASU, especially the Kaduna State University, was open, sometime. I'm not very sure. I could have been 2005 or 4. I'm getting the dates wrong. We started seeing more and more, people moving from, ABU to CASU. CASU was kind of becoming like the university for, I think, minorities, right? And then ABU was kind of restructured to have only people from certain part of the north, and then
Oh, I
eventually
see.
that same pattern was transposed to CASU also, right? So I hear people saying stuff like that when they apply for certain courses like medicine and law and whatnot. Certain groups are not, it could also, how Nigeria works. There is always this sense that, minorities are not treated fairly, right? So people share those sentiments, and I listen and I hear, people say those things that certain individuals might have reached that place to be appointed, I don't know, professor or to be vice chancellor or any other top post at the university, and then they will be passed over, right, for others, right? So you hear those kind of sentiment, and in Nigeria, people could easily read, nepotism into those patterns.
Yes, I wasn't sure if your question was more directed more towards recruitment of staffing or admission requirement, admission of students.
Both. Yeah, admissions, recruitment.
Yeah, for me, I still stick to the fact that maybe it's even worse. I always like my sentiment is that it's probably even worse in the southeast. In retrospect, now I think that you might find it less so in the west southwest than it is, and the upper you go, up north you go, the more prominent it is in terms of nepotism and in terms of admission for and even teaching components for that are more homogeneous to represent the because and you also find that a lot even in the literature that is being used. I remember when I had some I think an NYC or brand remember the name, an NYC fellow from the East who
Mm.
did political science that came to our department, and the names he was mentioning, I didn't know any of them, and and even scholars that they respected. But later on, I got to know them, but I didn't know any of those names because they were what they were used to, they were the literature they were exposed to in that part of the world. So I think, in some ways, I agree with you that particularly in the aspect of admission requirement admissions, it can be a little bit very homogenized in terms of how admission requirements are being, and that of course comes from who wields the power for admissions at the upper level, the highest level, and also religious sentiments that play out in all of these processes. But I agree, but I wouldn't agree with that when it comes to I think the Southwest is a lot more liberal when it comes to admission and staffing, and I think even too liberal. In fact, at some point in my department, even though it was in Ogun State, we didn't have one single indigene from Ogun State in the lecturing component, which was quite odd. So I was conscious of that fact. Why is it so that there's no one lecturer that most of them were from Delta, Southwest, Abia, one from Lagos, a couple from South, from Oyo State, Osun State, and the likes. There was none from Ogun State.